Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a tutorial with Bootstrap, HTML, and CSS. This is basically for those who are beginning to be a self-learned coder, just if you want to brush up on some Bootstrap, if you want to brush up on any sort of web accessibility in regards to Bootstrap, or just to get something else in your portfolio. So some of the things, this is what we're going to be creating. This is the page that we're going to be creating. It's got a nav bar, it's got a carousel, a form, and a footer here. And as you can tell, we put just some simple CSS here. If I go to inspect, which is part of the Google tools, I'll probably do a video just on those alone. So, but basically what inspect does is it allows you to be able to see the responsiveness. This would be in your Galaxy, on the Galaxy across multiple user interfaces, that sort of stuff. But as you can see, it still looks pretty. It still looks clean and neat. We go through the pixel. You know, you're going to basically got the iPad, and so it doesn't really matter what size, whether they're on desktop, whether they're on their phone, whatever it may be, it's still going to be responsive to them and be able to be something that's clean for the user to interact with. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to close out of this dev tools here. But basically this is going to be the finished project here. Some of the things that you guys will need to have installed before doing this tutorial is a GitHub account, the established SSH key for your GitHub account. There's plenty of tutorials out there on Google, and they could show you how to do that. So I would just say, if you don't have those things, just pause the video, install those, and you can always come back. The other thing is Bash. I'm a big Bash person if you're going to continue to follow me or work with me. And I just think that it's a quick, easy way to get done what needs to get done. And pretty soon you'll love Bash too, so don't be too overwhelmed by it. Visual Studio Code is what I use. You're welcome to use any other IDE, but if you do go with Visual Studio Code, ensure that you have the default browser extension installed. These here are basically, so these links right here are going to be my links to my fonts. So whenever you're doing any sort of front end work, kind of slash mixed with design, usually in a contract or a front end position, you'll be working with a designer, and they usually just hand you these links or certain pictures or this or that. For this here, I use the space exploration just because it's fun, it's cool, and it kind of gives it something clean to work with. So these are links to my Google fonts here. The fonts, these are the colors. So like the purple here, the colors that I'm going to be using. It's a good practice to always use two fonts. Usually one for the larger, your headings, your labels, that sort of stuff, and then the other one for your paragraphs. Your colors, you really want to stick between 3 to 5 colors. I would say use, you know, and if you kind of go around that, use the different colors within that same type of palette. But these colors here are going to be for the buttons, the form background here. So if you look, as you can see, you know, that sort of stuff. But you know, so and then my font color. Then I have links here to all of my pictures, which I will put into this video. But so you could see right here my little favicon. I got one here, I got one in the nav bar, and then the links to the pictures here. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead, and I was really debating on just getting to the coding part, but for those who are self-taught or who are wanting to learn, I know a lot of the small details can really hold you up from doing the big things. So I'm just going to walk you through from start to finish. And so being that this is obviously already on my GitHub, I've named it Bootstrap, the repository, Bootstrap Space Exploration. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a another repository that I'll probably end up deleting just for this tutorial. So I'm going to go to my GitHub, and I am going to say, let's create a new repository, and I'm going to name it tutorial space exploration. Okay, and just usually, and I really do encourage this, just trust me when I say that as you move along, whatever level you're at, it's part of good coders empathy to go ahead and get used to descriptions. Go ahead and get used to, adding to your READMEs, basically adding comments to your code, because if you get going and you've developed like in 1 day, 2 days to a week project where you have thousands of lines of code because you're just kind of in that zone, it's going to be a pain in the butt to go back and to put comments in that. It's going to be a pain in the butt to commit and give comments to those commits every single time that you're just dumping loads of code. So one of the things I would strongly suggest, is this is your description. It does say optional, but this is something you can always edit as you're going along. So I'm just going to say, for the purposes of this tutorial, I am filling out this description. Okay, and I'm going to put this on private just for myself, and then I will initialize with a README because, again, you just want to. It's good practice, and it's better to instill those skills, right from the top, right from the start, versus having it to be such a tasking or a daunting task to go forward and say, now I understand why I need the documentation. So we're going to go ahead and create a repository. And it is created. So obviously we're able to, be able to move throughout our GitHub. And again, I would strongly suggest each of these interfaces that I'm showing you, whether it's Google Fonts, whether it's going to be your Bootstrap, whether you have some, CSS-matic, which is a really awesome CSS tool, whatever it may be, any interface that I'm going to be interacting with you today, I would strongly suggest on your own to kind of explore it, and Google it. Google is going to be your best friend when it comes to development. It's just learning about how to ask those questions. How do I do a box shadow, or that's actually how I ended up finding this CSS-matic. Now, what I do is whenever I'm working with this, I'm like, okay, that's really far. Okay, and so I get more creative with it, I guess you could say. And so, here you can blur it. Okay, this is what a blur does. Okay, maybe I want it to go down a little more. This seems a little, and so you want to, there we go. See how it's more, I like that. And so then you would just literally copy and you would paste this into your code, into your CSS under the class with ID that you have it. But playing around with these things is what's going to really give you more information, and it's going to allow you to utilize that tool to its fullest capacity. Here we have gradient colors, border radius. So for instance, you see it's pretty cool. You get noise texture, which I don't really use a whole bunch, but the border radius, the gradient generator, and the box shadow is pretty cool. So this tool gets used a lot by me. It doesn't mean that this is not something that I couldn't do on my own, but once again, if you have tools that will help you do your job better, it's in this field, it's better to work smarter versus harder. All right. So back to this. We're going to go to clone or download and copy. I'm going to open up my bash here. Okay, and bash is, it could also be your command line or whatever it may be, but basically I'm going to change my directory to my desktop. That's where I'm going to drop this repository. So part of, you know, that Google search should be like git commands or git cheat sheet. Git is going to be your friend. The more that you know its commands, the better you're going to be. So you're going to do git clone paste, boom. And so it says that it did it. Oh, and here it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you. So it showed up on my desktop. So there it is. Okay. Just move this stuff around here a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is, once again, because I like to just go ahead and get this stuff done, is I'm going to change directory into this tutorial tab, and there you go. And then I'm going to touch, I'm going to make it index.html. Okay, and then from here, I'm just going to go ahead and open with code. And there's my index.html, and there's my README. So my README gives me my actual description. So do you see how that filling out that one little piece in the very beginning already got my README started? So boom. All right. So for this, I'm going to put this to the side here, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up my, this is our repo, so we don't necessarily need this anymore. So I'm going to close out of it. This is what we're going to be referencing. So in this, I don't know if you remember, I told you, we have what's going to be called, I know it looks like one single page here, but really what's going on here is we have 4 different components. We have the nav bar, 1, we have the carousel, 2, we have the form, which is 3, and then we have the footer, which is 4. Okay, so it looks like one single page, though. Let's see if I can move this. I guess I can't move it. So we have one single page here, and why this is important is because you're going to drop these components so it can be responsive, so it can actually, whenever you're going and you're doing CSS and you're thinking about the multiple different screens that it's going to come across, it's better to produce containers for these components where you could do the CSS to ensure that these are going to be accessible across multiple different user interfaces. So what that means is it means that if I were to need to do specific, I guess you could say, if I would need to do specific CSS for the component of my nav bar within the iPhone X, all I would have to do is basically grab more so the container versus the components. I would manipulate the container. And so this is important to know because it's going to end up saving you a lot of time. And if you build out the wireframe for the components, you're able to add components, delete components. You're able to really alter your code and keep it, up to par without having to do a bunch of heavy work. So this, once again, this is the reason I'm emphasizing this is because you're going to have to trust me. This is going to be very important for you in future development. It's better for you to learn the lesson now versus you having to go forward and saying, okay, oh my God, I just got 40 different front end pages that there's no accessibility, and now I have to go through and rewire all of it. Trust me, it's a pain in the butt. Also, too, if you kind of get yourself where you're looking at, this component, this container for this component, you're able to really span this type of thinking across different languages. React, JS, they work in components. So you're going to see that how you're learning your basic HTML, your basic CSS, your basic, Bootstrap is going to be beneficial for you as you evolve in your, you know, expertise. So, all right, so we have 4 different components. So we're going to close out of this. We're going to close out of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to Bootstrap. So you're going to go to Bootstrap, just Google search Bootstrap. I can drop the links in the description as well too. But for the purpose of this video and for your own digital literacy, Google Bootstrap 4, look it up. You're going to basically go into your getting started. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with this page here. This I'm going to copy and I'm just going to paste. Okay. Now, not going to spend too much time in regards to, this is basic structure. This is going to be your basic structure. You're going to be required to do this, you know, in all of your HTML, you know, excuse me, write-ups. So what you do is you have your head here, which is where your title. So this whole hello world, I'll just show you. So you see how it says hello world right here? This is the title, hello world. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop in a link. But basically the link is going to be, it's going to be for your icon, your favicon. So it's going to be icon. And then we're going to just do ref equals. And then remember I had this little notepad here. My little notepad. That's over here on my other screen. Apologies. Okay, so my little icon here. Copy. Just kind of drop it right into here. Okay. Oops. Obviously. We're going to go ahead and we're going to toggle this word wrap here because obviously something's going on. We need to be able to look at it. Okay. So we're going to do that. And then if you remember, we named it Bootstrap Exploration. So Bootstrap space exploration. All right. So we're going to go ahead and just refresh this. And as you can see, we have our icon. The title is changed. So boom. So what we're going to do here, just because it's good practice, is we are going to say favicon and title. Okay. And I always like to put my favicon right next to my title, just because, you know, as you're developing, like we'll be dropping in Google Fonts, if you're using any other dependencies or CDNs, you know, this can get kind of bulky and it can be difficult to read or go through. And for, you know, just, I guess you could say more so organization, being that your icon, your favicon is right next to your title, it's kind of, once again, that logical, you know, side of things it's probably best just to begin to learn how to place it right next to the title. And I say that because I've had to go in and I've had to decode and try to find, you know, the favicon in a humongous, you know, CDN loaded head. All right, so with the body here, this is basically your hello word. So body from this point to this point is where all of the magic's going to happen. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of this hello. So as you can see now, oh, I guess I can copy it over. Okay, and refresh, and there is nothing there. So going here, okay, remember we have 4 components. So what is going to be a good idea before you start dropping in these components is going ahead and wireframing for them. So we have 4 of them. So we are going to do, and so in Bootstrap, they have, everything is divided by, you basically want to do, let me just show you here, layout. So you have containers. Container fluids is what I usually like. I know that in this area, so everything's within a container fluid, but this form here, because I don't want it to span across the entire viewpoint. So here I just dropped this component within a container. But basically, how you build is you're always going to drop it into what would be a container, a row, and a column. So see how it's div class container fluid? This is basically what I want here. Then I would drop a row and a column. And the reason why is, once again, it allows you to always go back to build and delete with ease without having to mess up the rest of the screen. There, you know, as you get going, you'll, trust me, you will completely and totally understand what I'm saying. So here you could just go ahead and copy. I just normally like to, I'll just do it, div class container fluid. And so div, within that, you're going to put the div class row. And then within that, you're going to do the div class column. Okay. So you're going to do that. So this is going to be, let's just do wireframe. We'll say wireframe for component. And obviously I did not quick fix. I guess it doesn't like it. So, all right. So remember, we have 4 of those. One for the nav bar. So we're going to put actually. And the more you comment, you know, the better you're gonna, the more that you're able to move quickly and smoothly throughout your code without having to, you know, get stuck. And so this is gonna be for our carousel. You're able to dive deeper into that coder's mind. This is going to be for our form. And then we're going to do another one, and this one's going to be for our footer. So once again, we're going to copy. And, you know, I'm not sure if you know of the keyboard shortcuts, but basically you highlight it, you press Control-C, copy, and then when you want to go to where it's pasted, you press Control-V. So just a little, not sure if you'll know that or not. Okay, so remember what I said? I wanted everything to span the viewpoint, but my form here. So you see how, does that make any sense? So basically your viewpoint is going to be all the way across. There's no white, no nothing at all. Whereas here on this form, as you can see, I have space on the left and I have space on the right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of this container fluid here. So what you do here then is, being that we just did all of this, now we can really, and so I'm just looking through the components, so I apologize if it seems like, wait, what are you doing? You're moving too fast. Just go through and you can pick the components that you want. So I think I want the nav bar, not the navs. And this is the one that I want. But again, I'm going to change the icon and I'm going to change the name. So I'm going to do, oops, now that I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and do here. And I am going to do and so what I'm going to do for this image here, because once again, I had kind of already had it, it's my icon, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste the icon picture here. And so there we go. That's what we have. Now, see how this is, that's going to be CSS trick. So, all right. So next, we're going to do the carousel. We are going to do the one with the controls. So we're just going to copy. And we are going to paste in. Boom. And remember, we have our handy dandy. So for our images here, I'm going to go ahead and drop our images in the search. So images are now, what I'm doing is I'm going to, like for instance, I would just go to the image that I'm finding on Google and I would just say copy image address. Now, you can do this where you're actually attaching an asset folder and going through and saying, okay, I want to upload my own images. You can do that. But being for the fact that the images are already taking up, server space somewhere else, I don't necessarily want to bog down the site, and that's, once again, it's just a good practice for this. It's, okay, you can just do your own pictures, but you'll learn that where you can get your actual image address, where you can just have it accessing someone else's server upload, then you're going to be good to go. So if that makes sense, at least, that's how I think. All right, so we have our images. We did our first one. We're going to go ahead and we're going to drop the second one here. Because whenever you begin to build, and you're doing front end, because there's so many cool things out there nowadays, that stuff does actually, contribute to latency. And that stuff is what slows a website down. And a slow website down is not good SEO practice, and can actually push people away from your website. All right, so part of another SEO practice is this alternate text. So this alternate text means if for any reason that this person decides to take this image off of this server, or the address is changed, or my server is not properly uploading images, or whatever it is, it's going to load text where the image should be, but also it's going to be something as a consideration for those who are visually impaired and who use screen readers to maneuver through the www. So, and this is actually a big Google policy. Google is big on accessibility. So once again, it's always a good idea to start with saying, okay, let me just learn this from the get-go, so that it's implemented in your production of who it is you are as a coder, and you will be good to go. So we're just going to put, a space picture. You can get more descriptive, because, we have to remember those people who are not able to see, they do want to be just as involved as somebody who's able to see. So, but for this time, for the purpose of this video, we're just going to go ahead and put space picture. Okay, so it's going to be those alternate. It's an alternate text. So search is where you're going to drop, where the IDE, your browser, your server is going to basically search for those photos. What's going to be there? Your alternate is basically your alternative text, just in case the picture doesn't load, or for those who are visually impaired. Okay, so we're going to save it. We're going to check out, see what we got, and boom, there we go. So it's moving along quickly, and as you can see, if we were to inspect this, it's looking nice. It's being able to, it's one of the good things about Bootstrap, Alrighty, so the next thing is going to be the form here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our forms, And I just picked the one that actually has the email, password, address, select. This is select. So these are all inputs here, as you can see. So we got input. It's requiring the user to input. This is select. This is requiring the user to select. So I know it's like, oh, how do I get to know? The more that you kind of just work with it and go over the copy, what you are actually copying and pasting, the more you're like, okay, that makes sense. All right. So let's just check it out. Boom. Now we're gonna go. It's good once again to do the wireframe first. Okay. Then you're gonna drop your components. You're going to basically create the page, and then you're going to go through and do the CSS. So next, we're going to do the nav bar, but for the bottom, which is going to be a footer. Excuse me. And so this is what I want here. Okay. So let's check it out. And there we go. So we want this all the way at the bottom. We're gonna, as you can see, I have some space here between this. I have a shadow here. We did an enhancement on our fonts. We actually enlarged our fonts. We did our little hover thing here. We did a hover for the button, and we basically added some text in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just do that. So we're going to do this. Now, let's show you one of these Google things. So we're going to do copyright. It's right there. HTML. It's at copy, basically. So this is going to give you your copyright symbol in HTML. So this is where, you know, you see this is an example here. I'm not going to use the P tags, but basically this is where Google is your friend. Sometimes these little, so we're going to do at copy, and if you remember, I used the copyright symbol as the C for created by Space Explorer. So created by Space Explorer. And it should be good to go. Boom. Okay. So we're going to want to push this all the way over here. One of the good things about Bootstrap is it really does have some awesome utilities built into the actual library. So your utilities are going to basically be, again, you should definitely go through this on your own time and be able to, you know, play around with it. You could build up your portfolio that way, whatever it may be. But basically here versus CSS, where you would actually have to do kind of this thing. So like, for instance, so your border radius. You see how it's got all of this border radius? This is basically what you would drop into the CSS. Whereas if you go back here, you're going to get rounded or rounded 0 for that same exact thing. So in some instances, it's better to go with the Bootstrap utilities versus your CSS, and that's also going to help with consistency throughout the site. So what I'm looking for is basically, it's a margin left auto, and so that's going to be okay. I'm not sure where it's at, but I just know that it's there. All right. I guess I could search for it here. Hold on, let's see. There we go. So it seems, you see how it's going to auto. It's basically you're with the move to Flexbox in version 4, you can use margin utilities like margin right, auto to 4 siblings columns away from one another. So here, in this case, you're going to learn this stuff by, it pushes it over to the right side of my screen. So I don't necessarily need a bunch of CSS for that. Though I do need CSS to basically push this down. And once again, but let me continue with the utilities that Bootstrap has. So one of the other ones is margin top and margin bottom. So for this form, which all I want to do is I want to work with the container, not the form. Okay, this is the good thing about the wireframe. So margin top, 5, and then put margin bottom, 5. So these are considered classes. Okay, so now we have some nice clean space. Now the next thing that I do is basically I'm going to get my link for my Google Fonts, and so I already have that here. This is the link. These would be the font families that I'm going to be using. And so what this is basically you're going to say, oh, I like this one, I'm going to add it. And ooh, I like this one, I'm going to add it. And so now you have, obviously this is not what I just picked, but I was using it earlier. You're going to grab this link here. So this, in this case, this is going to be the link that I grabbed. Okay, and you are going to go all the way back up into the head here. And you're just going to put Google Fonts. And you're going to drop the link. And there's the link. Okay, and so you see how it gives you the font family? So you're going to have your font families where you can do this. So for me, we have the nav bar, which is these navs here. And then the labels that I want to do, my big, my one font class. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into, so style, CSS. We're going to do throw some style into our page. So what I'm going to do is so it'll be label. So you're like, okay, well, how do you know it's a label? Or, how do you know it's label or nav? So here, as you can see, nav, you see how it's nav right there, and then label. Okay, so nav, label, and we're gonna do this font family here. Okay, and we're going to do we're actually going to do a font size 16. Okay, so now let's just check it out. Okay, very nice. The thing, is I want this color to match up with this color here. So what I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to go ahead and call it this color. Okay, so it didn't do it. So what's probably going on here is that there's something overriding this, which I do know that this is because it's a light nav bar. So what I would do here is I want to override the Bootstrap. So I would put ID is going to be footer. And so we're going to take this ID ID identify ID here, and ID is basically going to be a pound. Oops. Well, obviously I know it's called footer. Okay, so these are basically you see how these are your labels. These are literally your labels of the HTML. So you don't need to put anything there. Now, class, whenever you're looking something up by its class, which in this case it would be navbar, it would be a period. So we would put, for instance here, navbar, and that's how you would, the CSS, the compiler would go through and read and grab, oh, I need a class of navbar. So in this case, where we didn't have a class, we had an ID, it identifies ID by pound. So labels, you don't necessarily need to do anything with that. Classes are identified with periods in front of it, and IDs are classified by the pound there. So what we're going to do, being that it didn't work here, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to cut it. It still didn't work. Okay, I see. So it's embedded. That's why I didn't put the ID right where it should be. So footer, boom, boom. So what this does, remember that's that class, because it was a class. So within this ID, look for the class of navbar text and make it the color, this color, and there you go. So, all right. So then the next thing we want to do is we actually want to change the input or the font for basically our input here. Input and select. So here, we're going to do input because it's a label, and select because it's a label, and we're going to do, I'm going to grab this one right here. And I'm going to make the font smaller. And so there we go. Okay. All right. So next, because I don't want this white space, I'm going to basically alter it first. Normally that's how you do it, but I'm going to do HTML/body, and we are going to do where our width is 100%, our height is 100%, our margin, because Bootstrap likes to input that margin there. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to make it at 0. Oops. And then we're going to make our padding where it's 0, because Bootstrap sometimes likes to implement that stuff on your behalf. And then we're just going to do an overflow. It's basically at this axis is going to be hidden because we don't want the excess scroll bar. So what that means is, I don't know if you've ever been on pages where, because there might be something that might be not necessarily showing in the viewpoint altogether, it will give you like a little scroll bar at the bottom, or whatever it may be. I don't necessarily like that. I don't think it's clean, and so I try to avoid that as much as possible. So we're just going to go ahead and check this out, and there we go. Okay, so next, obviously you can see that there's some padding, margin stuff going on here. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take that margin stuff out. Okay, so we're gonna just basically say, because remember we have all of these wireframes. So this is the beauty about wireframing. You can do container, so they're basically container fluids, if you remember. And we're just gonna say the width is gonna be 100%. Okay, and then we're gonna put no padding. And there we go. Beautiful. So you see how me doing that with just the wireframe here is allowing me to do CSS across the whole entire page versus each and every different component. Again, this deals with your latency because you can actually bog down a website with a bunch of CSS. So it's just cleanliness, organization, and looking at it from a whole versus just let's work on this one. And I've done that. I'm telling you these things because I've learned these things from my own experience. Okay, so now we're going to basically, the footer, we want to make sure it stays to the bottom. Let's just check it out. Let's look at our footer. It does look like it's staying to the bottom. Okay. It does look like it's staying to the bottom. All right. Normally I like to throw in some CSS for the footer. Let's just do that. All right. All right. And there we go. Now it has no choice but to stay at the bottom. All right. So we are now going to work on our form. So we have, let's go ahead and exit out of the step tools. Compare the two. So we have our nav is done. We have box shadow going on here. The other thing is we don't have, so we have blue basically focus going on here versus the purple. So we'll work on that. So basically, I just want to show you, let me pull it up here, your Google Tools. So whenever I'm here, this is my form. As you can see, this is going to be the CSS for the form with the Google Tools, okay? I go to hover. Basically, whenever you're focused, you see how that's what it's going to be considered within the CSS is on the input, this is focused, and it's going to give you a border color of, this is where you get your border color, and then you're going to get a box shadow of this, okay? Now, we want to do, show you again, okay, because it took me a while to get this stuff. See how my colors are different? So what you do, or one of the things that you can do, see how it overrid it? So this is the Bootstrap automatically saying the border color on focus is going to be this, the box shadow on focus is going to be this, and I basically said, nope, this is what I want it to be. So that's what you're going to put down. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just copy this, just for time and purposes. And that is the power of Google Tools. Okay. And there we go. There we go. So basically, remember, I even pulled it up. I basically just copied from there. It was a little quick cheat thing, but that's the stuff that I want you guys to be able to do eventually, because the more time that you save on this stuff, the more that you can go and be awesome in doing some cool automations or whatever it may be that you want to be doing. So form control now is there. And next we're going to focus on this button. So the button is going to be, we're going to go all the way down. I just want to show you so that you can see the button is going to be a class of button. So we're going to go all the way back up to the top here. And we're just going to do background color. And we're going to do, remember, we're going to stay consistent with those. And then we're going to do a border color. And we're just going to use the same one as well too. So now, there we go. Now, remember what I was saying? So if I click on it, go, or if I, like whenever I hover over it, I want to go ahead and do a button, hover, and then we're going to do a background color. And remember, I have my little cheat sheet here. And so what this is going to do, I'll just show you. See how it hovers that? But I want to make my border color a little bit more boom. So I'm going to do border, and I'm going to do solid. We're going to do 3 pixels, and I'm going to just grab this color here and frame it. There it goes. So got our focus, got our button, and so really the next thing that we need here is our little box shadow here. So in this case, we're going to go to box shadow, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find something with delete all these pounds, and we are going to try to make it as even as possible because I don't necessarily want to. Do something small. You don't need a lot. So basically what I'm going to say is for this carousel, so the class, we're going to grab the class of carousel. So I'm a horrible speller, by the way. And so just go here. And so there you go. You can probably make that a little bit darker, in my opinion. Let's go with this. Let's see. Let's just check out this color here. Okay. Another check out white. Let's just check out. Much better. So something subtle, something soft that says this is going to pop. And there you go. We have actually created a page, something to add to your portfolio, give you some skill sets within a small amount of time, and it spans across multiple different screens. So there you go. And so I would, do this in your own theme, figure out your own colors that you're going to like to use, change up your fonts, try to be creative with it. But basically here from this point, and I'll show you this, there's going to be multiple different ways. Like so CSS you can put into your HTML or whatever it is that you're, working on. There's like 3-4 different ways that you can do it. The more that you mess around with it, the better that you're going to be. The more that you're going to know your own style and this and that. So for instance, right now, let me just go ahead and I'm going to select all of this. And then I'm going to do where it's, I think it's Control-Shift-T. And I'm going to do Format Document. And it formatted it all for me. So now it looks even prettier. So that's an extension that you can do. So I'm going to do Control Save. So the reason why I brought up, because you can actually, add and commit your code to your GitHub in, several different ways. I'm going to show you probably the best way to learn, just in case, you're working on someone else's IDE and you just don't know how to do it or whatever it may be. So we're just going to go for our bash here, and we're just going to say, we're going to maneuver to this directory, so CD, so change directory, desktop, and then we're going to CD, this is the tutorial, and okay, there it is, and then we're just going to do git add, okay, we're going to do git commit m, and then we're just going to do we do HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, or tutorial. Okay, and then I'm just going to do git push origin master. Okay, and so it should be there. So what that means, if I go to my GitHub now, just check it out. And there it is, index.html. So how you could do this from here is if you go to settings. So you see how I have this actually displaying on, where it's rendering the live version that I can eventually, so what I did here was for this, you could click live version here. So that way, people are able to see a rendering of your code. It's a good thing to go, to learn, especially as you get more involved in your languages and the things that you're going to be doing. And so from here, you're actually given, this is your settings for your repository. Again, I would not going to go through all of this, but I would, suggest spending some time and saying, oh, what can this do and what does it look like? And, research all the other people who've worked so hard, being able to see, if you can grasp something from their knowledge. But so here, this is your GitHub pages. This is basically when you have an account, you have your own repo, your own server, and this is going to be part of your GitHub. So like for instance here, if I were to click the live version here, and I would go to, I got hello world. If I were to go to and just add a, portfolio, you're going to get my portfolio. If I were to go here and just do a bootstrap, so do you see how the address is really never changing unless it's your repo. So this is going to be your pages. These are your pages. So from here, what you could do is you could say master branch. And sometimes it does not want to, it says your site is ready to be published. And so sometimes it won't push the change immediately. Obviously, I'm getting a 404. So I'm going to wait just for a little bit. Just refresh this a whole bunch of times and see if I can get it to push. Just for the purpose of you guys waiting with me. Okay, so I had to do some debugging. I had my repo on private, and I'm not sure why GitHub was not. I've launched private repos and demonstrated them or displayed them before, but for whatever reason, it wasn't doing it this time. So, just in case you hit your own bug, if in the beginning you did as I did and you made the repo private, when you go to alter that settings and display with your GitHub pages from the master branch, it's not rendering anything. Just try to debug. So all you would do, so this is, remember we were here at the GitHub pages. I pressed the master branch. It wasn't rendering it. Basically, right here is where you would say, make this repository private. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to push it back to being private. Because once again, I'm probably going to delete this one. Just because I already have it. And so let's see if it's still going to render my... And yeah, so there it is. So there you go. So you have a new add to your portfolio, to your GitHub. I hope you enjoyed it, had fun. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else, just leave a comment below. All right, thanks. Bye.